up in a small town, and it had no swimming pool. And then finally, there were enough people to have a bond, and they put in a swimming pool. And from then on, I lived my life at that pool.
My first experience in high school swimming was just coming out as a freshman. At that time, we didn't have a club, and I swam for Chesterton High School. So I have a lot of history with Chesterton High School.
I got involved really at Indiana State. I was taking a WSI class, and Paul Selge, the coach there, said, "Con, how'd you like to be on the swim team?" So I was on the swim team for 3 years, and then loved it, and then went out when I started teaching. I got a job at Warren Central and was their swim coach for 6 years, and then went to Warren Central and was their coach for 18 years.
I have loved diving since I was 3 years old. I would jump, I would climb up to the 3-meter board and jump off into my dad's arms, and that was my first experience with diving. I loved the thrill of the jump. And when Olympics were on, I was always the first one to watch all the diving, and I was so enthralled with it. And so when I became an 8th grader, my dad and my mom met the diving coach from Franklin Community High School. So they introduced themselves and said they had a diver, or a daughter that was interested in diving. And so lo and behold, the coach invited me to come to a practice. And when the practice was over, he told my parents, "I think she has some talent."
Well, it was fun. You're individual when it comes up to your race. You don't have a team blocking for you. You're on the blocks. In those days, we didn't even have them. But when you start the race, you're all on your own. And I just liked the water and the competition.
What first drew me to swimming, my parents. I was 5 years old at the time, and there was not a lot of year-round sports. Back when we moved to St. John, Indiana, the local high school had a swim club, and I was 5 years old, probably the very first 8 and under that team ever experienced. They signed me up. I remember my tryout at the time was, "What can you do, young man?" by Coach Bauer. I didn't really understand the question too well, other than I dove in and swam the entire length of the pool underwater, because that's all I knew how to do at the time, was swim underwater. I came up, took a big breath, he gave me a high five, and gave me the biggest smile, pulled me out of the water with a big hug, and said, "You'll do just fine, now we'll teach you how to swim on top of the water." From then, I think I was just hooked emotionally. The concept of a coach looking after you, showing some pride and appreciation for what a little kid could do, and then showing some, I think, ambition and desire from their end as to what I could be, the potential.
In 1973, when girls swimming and diving was GAA, I did my student teaching, and I decided to go to a GAA swim practice. And at that time, Portage was renting the Valparaiso University pool on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I decided to go and see what it was all about. And I can remember it was kind of hilarious, because at the VU pool, they had lane 1 that was marked off for lap swimming. The rest of the pool was just open for rec swimming. There may have been 3 girls at that time that were wearing what you would have called at that time a Speedo. The rest of the girls were all in 2-piece swimming suits with beach balls. And for diving, the girls were jumping off the board, attempting flips and doing cannonballs and can openers. And I thought, wow, I guess I expected a little bit more.
Well, I think that there were several factors. In the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of consolidations. Back in, there was a time when there were over 700 high schools in Indiana. And now there's approximately a little less than 400 public schools in the state. And so there were a lot of consolidations. So when you may have a consolidation, they're building a new school to house students from 2, 3, 4 schools. And that was right in the same time frame when Doc Councilman was IU, and he was being successful there, and it was becoming more popular, or at least people in Indiana were paying attention to it because of IU's success. And so I think that when they were building a new high school, a lot of them include the pool in it, And so as far as the numbers of pools, the numbers of swimmers, it grew dramatically in the 60s. And then but since then, as other schools have been built, they are better designed, better pools than what even were being done back in the 60s. But I think the Doc Councilman and the consolidations of school corporations was going on then was really the big factor in why there got to be so many indoor pools in Indiana.
When I started in 1963, my first year of coaching, there were 31 schools that had swimming programs. And, you know, that year was the first year they had sectionals. There were 3 sectionals they had throughout the state. My final year, which was in 1968, there were over 180 schools that had programs, and part of that was because of the swimming being part of the physical education curriculum, which came into the schools. All the schools that were building new facilities at that time, most of them were including a pool for their physical education programs, and so the swimming pools became part of the program, and the schools had swimming programs, and it was really a good thing. But it just kept growing and growing throughout the state.
When I first started coaching swimming in the 50s, it's amazing the changes that have taken place from then till now. First of all, the pools were very tiny. They were 20 yards by maybe 20 feet wide, 24 feet wide. There were some pools that were 6 lanes wide, but they were still 20 yards. There were maybe only a handful of schools that had swimming pools. Then when they started consolidating the rural schools into one big high school, they put big gymnasiums and nice swimming pools at that new high school. I think that's the way the state came up with all the swimming pools in high schools that they have now. There used to be like a clothesline that went down the pool with a couple floats on it separating the swimmers. They've come up with lane lines, dividers. Goggles came into effect in the 60s, early 60s. There's just been a tremendous amount of change. There's weight programs. There's kids specializing now. They only swim. They don't play other sports. It's just super sport in Indiana now.
Well, early in the season, it was definitely the book. Finally, someone came out with the book on swimming, and that was Doc Councilman. I have to say that was my Bible. It was called The Science of Swimming. And before that, in the very early days, basically, they just swam distance. You know, your swimmers just cranked it out in the pool. Whatever their stroke was, they just cranked it out. And then in the early 60s, maybe middle 60s, when this book came out, he actually had some underwater shots of stroke technique and the physics involved. And then the coaches started picking up on that. And I know that we worked really hard on stroke technique for strength and power, efficiency, stroke efficiency. When they built Ben Davis Pool, they built an underwater window. And so on Saturday practices, we had an arrangement made that we did a reconfiguration of our pool lanes. And then my husband bought me the very first camcorder that was ever out. And I'd be in the basement at the window, and they would have a time and swim back and forth, and we would tape their strokes to see if they're getting their pull underwater. So that really changed swimming a lot.
Well, I knew Doc and Hobie both. You know, when I competed and swam for Indiana University, and Doc would show up on the pool deck, and I specifically remember when the pool opened, the new pool opened down in Bloomington. Doc came to our first meet, and you know, I introduced myself. Doc, you know, hi, I'm Chris Plum. I'm I'm a junior swimmer on the team, and he goes, yes, of course, you know, I knew you were at NCAAs last year, and he spit out my times, you know, and so just the fact that he remembered and knew who I was and my times, you know, I think with the influence obviously spread greater than that, you know. Swam in the old Hyper building, and we knew we were swimming with the great teams that Doc built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and the pictures on the wall, and it just meant so much to us guys on the team that, you know, we had such a, you know, creator of the sport and just a guy who enhanced the sport and made it better. And, you know, I read his books, and, you know, certainly left a profound influence on me, knowing that as a coach you can have a strong effect on young people, and you know, so you can be an innovator too. And I, you know, that's how Doc, you know, influenced me as a coach.
My first impressions of Doc Councilman was that he taught technique, swimming technique. He made a lot of videos, and I would show them to the kids, and I really believe that a coach is a teacher. You teach, and then you take things from there. One thing that I caught on to real quick is he invented the isometric machines, and we used to do that in the field house on the bleachers and get my kids working. And I was probably the first coach in Indiana high school that had a weight program for his swimmers. We would do weights on days we didn't have practice, and I got criticized for it. Swimmers can't, you know, you'll hurt the swimmers if they're lifting weights. They'll get too muscle bound. Well, that's not true, and now all kinds of levels have weight programs.
In the preparation to become a world-class level coach, we as coaches or we as individuals often look to mentors, and I had the great opportunity that when I moved to the state of Indiana to be at Ball State University to meet Coach Hobie Billingsley, who was then the coach at Indiana University. And Hobie took me under his wing. He was inspirational, he was tough, he was incredibly knowledgeable about the sport. And I always thought, man, if I could just take his brain and put it in my head, I would really catch up on things and really become a greater coach faster. So I really sought him for that information, and he was willing to give it, as he was to many people in the state of Indiana, to the nation, and to the world. Hobie had started the World Diving Coaches Association, where he tried to bring all the world diving coaches together to tap into the knowledge that each of them had, to spread that among everybody so that we could improve the sport, not only nationwide, but worldwide.
So I think that everybody in diving is very competitive, but at the same time, it's such a small group of people that you learn very quickly that you're friends with everybody, and you can go to different coaches there and kind of pick their brain and ask them questions. And if there's a meet that your coach isn't able to be at, or if they missed one of your dives during practice and they didn't see it to coach it, another coach will just jump in and say, hey, you should, you know, do this on that dive, it'll make it better. And I remember times that my coach would even take me to another coach and say, fix this, you know, she's not listening to me, or she's not getting it, what can you tell her? And so I think that all the coaches support each other because it is a small community, and all the divers just grow up together.
Swimming is family for many reasons. I mean, not just your immediate family, but also outside of that too. I mean, you're with your teammates, your coaches, you're with them twice a day, maybe 3 times a day, you know, every day of the week for months, years. You start to develop those close-knit relationships. Those are the people that you associate yourselves with the most. When you're traveling with them to meets across the country, and you just, over time, you get to know them more and more, better and better, and they become, you know, your family away from home. And, you know, those are lifelong relationships that, you know, I still have friends that I grew up with swimming that I'm still friends with today.
Back then, we did a lot of AAU, which we don't hear a lot about anymore, but AAU was where diving was. It wasn't U.S. diving. And the weekends were so much fun because we would go to these places and we'd stay all weekend, and you were friends with all the teams. We all were there together, and it was so much fun. I remember one night, it was 11 o'clock at night, we'd had all these problems, and here we are. It was cold, like 50 degrees. We're diving outdoors. Our feet were actually sticking to the bottom of the board because it was so cold and wet, and we just have to wrap up after we get done diving. But those memories are just so much fun, the laughter and the bonding, and it wasn't just your team, it was all the teams. We cheered for everybody because it was so fun we were just good friends with everyone.
Well, I think the community piece, I think there's a strong swimming community in the state of Indiana. I know when we attend national meets, Team Indiana sits together at the national meet. I know there's been several camps in the summertime where the athletes and coaches come together, and there's a strong, sense of pride and community. Hey, we represent Team Indiana. I mean, Indiana has its own swimming cheer. So I think that sense of I have no problem going to help any athlete at these camps, or, in a day, and, someone will come over and we go to meets, and the kids know each other really well. And, every meet is like, oh, I get to see so-and-so today. And the parents, for the most part are pretty friendly to each other. And, I think that we understand that while we compete against each other, in the meet, this is a community and we do this together, and we need everybody to rally together. We understand the commitment that our sport takes, and that you can't do it alone. You need a community to compete with, and you need community to support you in down times, and that helps make our sport better as a whole.
I think that social media just in our culture is huge now, and I personally love to get on social media and see coaches that are posting their athletes learning new dives or doing amazing dives, because it really shows the diving community that they're really proud of what they are doing as coaches, and even more so what those athletes are doing. And just to see little videos and quotes of divers that are out there working hard, they have goals, and they are working towards individual success and success for their swimming and diving teams. I think it's great not only for people in general to see, but younger kids that are in the sport, because they see people with goals, they see people working hard, and they want to be a part of that eventually. So I think it's really recruited a lot of interest for our sport, because it is a beautiful sport, and it's unique because it's, a dive only takes literally seconds. So it's really easy to post videos, and I don't know, I think it's helped get the word out about diving and just spur some interest in people.
I think technology has changed so much that it's kind of changed the face of swimming. Years ago, not only have the pools changed, and the pools have changed because not only are they bigger, but they're more designed for less resistance and for speed. They're deeper, they have better gutter systems, better lane lines. The suits have changed things a lot. The suits are very water resistant, and they provide some buoyancy, etc. So the suits have changed things, technology has changed things, but also so has social media and things like that. Because right now, back when I started, if I was going to scout a team and we were going to have a meet with a team, I would have to call coaches that they have swam and get their times and write it all down, and I'd have to make a series of phone calls. And then it changed to somebody could fax results over to me, and now it's changed to I can just get on a website and I can get it, or I can get on an app and I can get it through Meet Mobile if they've done it. So it has changed things a whole lot. And I have access to the way people train, just much more. So from a information standpoint and a technology standpoint, it has helped swimming tremendously.
What's special about the culture of swimming in Indiana? You know, I guess I really didn't know much better. You know, it was either swimming or IU basketball, and that's what we talked about in my house. And you know, so swimming's always been a part of our life, and the fact that swimming is such an important part of Indiana, and I think that kind of goes back to Doc Hobie and what he did at the university at IU, and I think that it's important. It's a great sport. It's you know, every time you talk about Indiana swimming, you know, everybody's like, oh, you know, it's one of the best swimming states in the country, and it's this, you know, little small state in the middle of the country. There's no water around it, and so it's really fun to be a part of Indiana swimming history and to be a part of how important high school swimming is, and just the sport in general. I think that's what's really fun about the sport. They're good people that come out of the sport, and I hope that there'll be more in the future.